Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Umar Mahmood. I will be your host for today's event. It is a pleasure to have you all here today for the annual Executive Lecture Series organised by the London College of Business Management and IT. As you're all aware, being students of business, the sands are very drastically shifting between West and East. As you know, the major economies, the emerging economies, is something which is very much talked about in academic and financial circles. Currently, China, being the second biggest economy after America, surpassed Japan just last year. And the growing discussions which are rising as a result of that regarding the surpluses which have been generated in the Asian economies within regards to China and India, and that's something which hopefully Mr. Jonathon Story should shed some more light on. But in summary, what I will be briefly just mentioning is that, as you know, the Asian economies have a more robust fiscal and economic structure. They are generating more and more surplus annually, and they have now become the world's biggest creditors, whereby they are now loaning most of the developed countries the vast bulk of their budgetary requirements. And as a result of that, there is a huge fight, if you could call it that, taking place between the natural resources that these huge nations are fighting for, and that's another thing which hopefully Jonathan's story should shed some more light on. So in short, it's something which will be very interesting today. It's a very hot topic, and I'm very keen to understand the implications of how the sands are very quickly shifting, and the new powerhouse which is emerging in Asia, and what the geopolitical and geo-economic repercussions or the outcome.
I think we should remember that the emergence of India and also Pakistan is very, we should remember, linked to political questions. We should not forget problems of demography, but I would like to mention water as the most important factor geopolitically. Water. Water is number one for China. It is number one for India, and it is number one for Pakistan. And that's why I would argue that the wars or the struggle or the competition that is implicit around the Himalayas is so important. The reason why Mao Zedong moved into Tibet in 1950 was related to the re-establishment of the boundaries of China. Now, I think the presence of China in Tibet is about keeping its finger on the waters that irrigate India and China. So I think water politics is something actually which is a very significant factor in the geopolitics. So I've mentioned the three things so far, which is international ramifications of the emergence of Asia Pacific and of India, development implications, some political implications, and then finally we were in the introduction, I was sort of advised almost to say something about rising powers and that big debate in international affairs. Henry Kissinger's recent book on China, which he's written, is something, if you're interested in that, would be worth looking at, because he is writing that, yes, China is the emerging power, but there's no reason it should be like Germany in 1914. There's no reason that American diplomacy should be similar to British, Russian, and French diplomacy of that time. In effect, he's arguing a new form of engagement between China and the United States. And that, of course, is the direction of policy which India and Pakistan have to move to, because I always take a pessimistic view on human affairs, and I take a very pessimistic views on international affairs because of the difficulties, obviously, of keeping the peace. But if you think of the opportunities out in Asia Pacific and of South Asia, but also the prospects of communal strife, the rivalries over frontiers, the urge of individuals for status, etc., there's more than enough fire that has to be carefully dealt with. I'll end up by saying there can be no doubt that if we take a sober view of humanity's prospects, we can start talking about serious policies which may have a capacity to mitigate the dangers that surely lie ahead.
What are the lessons for our economic management and for our economy?
My question is, our cultural outlook in 20th century, the US and then the European were currently dominant. What will be the effect of this changing?
The Western world seems to be promoting democracy, preaching democracy, like every country should be democratic. But democracy is supposed to promote economic competitiveness. But looking around, it seems not to be so. Why is it so placed? Thank you.
You know, with the influence of the Arab Spring, can you see any future for the one world policy or key market as Islamic finance? Or
Right. Well, thank you very much. The first question, banking systems and governance. Why have they collapsed? It's a very, very complicated question. But the heart of my answer is that, and it leads into my response to the second one, is that Western banking systems are like the arteries in your body which convey the blood. Money is the blood of the modern economy. Now, bankers, I've taught lots of them, and I'll tell you what I think of them. I think they're very smart idiots. Don't take the second one wrong, because they're not politically savvy, they're not even interested. If the government gives them a market, they'll run until there's a crash. The second key question is the cultural outlook. Who's going to be the new dominant power? Is it going to be... Well, there's a big debate about the end of the West. The stakes is not who. The question should be, in my view, not who is going to dominate, but whether we emerge as a civilization of civilizations. And the challenge is instantaneous, it's now. People who think they're on top generally are on the way down, I suggest. Then thirdly, democracy. I thoroughly agree with the implications of your question. Because human affairs are complex, going around and saying I've got the best system is quite ludicrous. Not least because emerging from the Cold War, of course there was one very important lesson of the collapse of the communist system. The communist system was a monopoly over power, over truth, over economics, over everything. It was a monopoly, and it led to incredible abuses, there's no doubt about that. So an open society, maybe with democratic features in terms of elections, is definitely an improvement of that. But boasting about how great our democracies are and why we should go around and tell everybody to be a democracy, to my mind, is short-sighted, to say the least. I'll just point out one argument which I think is a central feature. It's clear to me that modern democracies, from Japan to India, the whole of Europe, and the United States, Canada, and actually exceptionally for the moment Australia, South Africa, have, to say the least, great difficulties in balancing their budgets. The whole of Europe, Japan, India, America has run a deficit since 1969-74. That has led to a huge number of the explosion of the bond markets and the foreign exchange markets. Modern democracies are about competitive parties, promising commitments, redistributing other people's money, appealing to the media who are looking for sales of newspapers and news, so-called, big lobbies who are pushing their goods, special interest groups, and so on. And then, with all the foibles of humanity, like Mr. Cameron selling his dinner party for £250,000 a night. I mean, you put all that together, and governments clearly find it difficult to control. But that does not mean that single-party dictatorships or individual dictatorships across Africa or anywhere else are good. Islamic finance. Well, I mean, it will be developing. Is it one of the key centres of global finance? Not yet. But I'd point out that Iran is becoming one. And Israel is very frightened. So all of these issues, I would argue, have to be resolved. Because finance requires long-term horizons, the rule of a law, which everybody understands, and a stability that can lead to a prosperous financial system. I'll sing you a song. I don't know if you know an old singer, for, I suppose you're too young really, from the 1930s.
I'm not that old.
His name is Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson? Yeah. Great singer. Beautiful.
Heard the name.
Afro-American, who used his voice to promote the Afro-American cause in the United States. But he has this lovely little song called Deep River. Deep river, my home lies over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Oh, don't you want to go to that gospel feast, that promised land where all is peace? Oh, deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground.
What a nice time. What a nice time.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, everyone.